Hello and welcome to another edition of Unwrap Africa. I'm Thembekile Mrototo, and on this program we celebrate and unpack the latest news, trends, as well as successes of the African continent. Siyaqaqa. Before we get going, what we want to know from you this evening, our question of the day, if you will, is what is your view on the United States sending hardened criminals to African countries? First Eswatini, now Rwanda, taking on a similar deal. You can let us know by sending your thoughts via voice note. The WhatsApp number is +278 459 1897. You can also find us on Facebook, by the way, where we are SABC Unwrap Africa, and on X the handle is SABC News_TV. We'll reflect on your thoughts later in the hour. First, though, a look at the top stories from the continent this week. Sudan's military says it has downed an Emirati plane in Darfur, killing 40 suspected mercenaries. The army has blamed foreign interference as tensions with the UAE rise, the United Arab Emirates denying that it's fueled the conflict in Sudan. The United Nations has condemned M23 rebels in the DRC for killing more than 300 civilians in the east of the country. The attacks defy a recent ceasefire and are expected to deepen the region's crisis. Lesotho has received some relief from the latest US textile tariffs. Officials, though, warn that the damage has already been done. In Ghana, the finance minister has been named acting defense minister after a helicopter crash that killed the defense chief and 7 other people. A period of national mourning has been declared as the investigations continue. And in Morocco, the beloved beach festival is back for its 21st summer. Well, ranges will run between July 15th to August 21st with a vibrant mix of hip-hop, Rai, fusion, traditional Moroccan rhythms, as well as international acts. The coastlines are set to come alive in music and culture until later this month. And a church in Lagos, this is a church for the deaf, has brought vibrancy to silent worship. Drums are used to guide the congregation while sermons unfold in sign language. So in this inclusive space, members experience faith as well as fellowship in their own language. Well, then, as South Africa continues to mark Women's Month and the continent as a whole observes a similar period, when women lead, they also make sure that they bring other women along with them. At least that is the perspective of Ambassador Mathu Joyini. She is the first and only woman to lead the South African mission to the United Nations in New York. That's not just since democracy in 1994, but since the global body's establishment in 1945. Well, earlier this week, Joyini spoke to SABC News, allowing us to visit her at the mission in Manhattan and talk about the historic nature of her role, as well as the future importance of an organization that is often criticized for having good intentions that often fail at the point of implementation. Have a look.
My president, Mr. Cyril Ramaphosa, appointing me as the permanent representative of South Africa to the UN.
Joyini presented her credentials to the Secretary General Antonio Guterres during the height of the COVID pandemic in February 2021 and has been the face of South Africa's positions, be that in the General Assembly,
and the South African Development,
the Security Council, or the various forums and side events that the UN is well known for. And with the theme for Women's Month, Building Resilient Economies for All, Joyini feels an immediate alignment.
If you look at the work at the UN, and often people think that it's just about peace and security, but actually it's about peace and security, it's about human rights, but importantly in Article 1 of the purposes of the Charter is about coming together, cooperating to solve economic problems, cultural problems, and humanitarian problems. And as you would know, that we always talk about the global south, the global north, and making sure that we all develop and we leave nobody behind. So economic development is quite crucial to the work that we do here. There are frameworks. There's the Economic and Social Council, because ECOSOC has been created to look at precisely that.
Among her leadership roles, Joyini currently co-chairs the ad hoc working group on the revitalization of the work of the General Assembly in its current 79th session that codifies the selection process for the next UN Secretary-General. She chaired the fourth committee that addresses decolonization issues in the 78th session, co-chaired the UN's 2023 Science, Technology and Innovation Forum, while she also chaired the Bureau of the Commission on the Status of Women in 2022 and 2023, among other key positions. And despite the gains and the incremental progress for greater equity between women and men, Joyini says the work is ongoing in the current context where forces are working hard to stifle that trajectory.
As much as you have Mathu as the first woman, that's only the beginning. There's a need to make sure that we progress. We look at how, there's a saying, and whenever we develop frameworks here, we talk about the importance of women leadership. When women are leading, they are likely to look at how do they bring more women to make sure that they take up other important and crucial positions. So women leadership is quite crucial for all of this. And indeed, I've seen it so many times in our own country, in our own government, when we have the women leaders, the women ministers that then look out for the specific issue. So we just have to make sure that 75 years later, you have the first woman ambassador here. But think about the UN itself. 80 years, we don't have a woman Secretary General. So we don't have a woman that has led the UN. And it's about time that we have a Madam Secretary General.
Tell me why it's so important that the world has a first female Secretary General when the election comes up next year.
Because it's right for it to be that. I mean, there's what is it, 51% of the global population is women, and for 80 years, 80, you haven't had a woman leading the UN. I think it's about time. It's only fair.
And as conflicts rage, Ukraine, Gaza, Sudan to mention a few, climate disasters and development emergencies, the UN is often seen as unable to effect the requisite changes needed on the ground, and fast enough. People looking at the United Nations from afar sometimes make the case that it is not effectively changing circumstances on the ground. Tell us why the United Nations still matters and why it is such an important pillar of South Africa's foreign policy.
We don't have any other space except the United Nations. This is where we come and influence. This is where we come and demand frameworks that help us globally govern whatever issue it is. You can't do it anywhere except here at the UN. So if you think about it, it's a norm-setting space. International law that we develop here at the UN, frameworks that we develop here at the UN, those become important when an issue comes up. And I mean, typical example is when we saw what's happening in Gaza, and South Africa used a framework, international law, a convention to say, hey, there's a convention that we developed together that we all signed up to. Can we use it to resolve this problem that we have? So countries rely on those frameworks.
And as she winds down her time in New York, some personal reflections.
I value this place. I value the UN. And of course you come in prepared, you know positions of your country, But then landing here, there are others like you, others that you need to work with, to work in the room with. And The community of ambassadors is an important one, because talking to each other about what needs to happen, you then realize that we all care. All PRs care about this place, they care about problem solving. That's the one thing you can find common amongst us. As to how, it's a different issue. So I like the community of people that I work with, the PRs. And one thing I must share with you is that yes, the problem solving happens in the halls, in the GA, in the ECOSOC rooms, in the conference rooms, but they also happen in the dinners and in the breakfast and in the lunches. And something I've learned and I appreciate, by the way, is that there's no free lunch, there's no free dinner. So when you get an invitation, it's a dinner invitation, you know that it is a working dinner.
But it's also important to show up.
And it's important to show up and how you show up.
Joyini's tenure at the United Nations due to end early next year, and until then, there's likely a lot more showing up to do. Sherwin, SABC News, New York.
So take you back now and look at reflections, your responses, in fact, to our question to you tonight. We're asking, what is your view on the United States sending hardened criminals to African states like Rwanda and Eswatini? Let's see what's come in so far. Bongani Matevu says, how do you accept a person whose country of origin doesn't want him near its borders? Daz says it's good for our country and economy. I'm assuming, Daz, you'd be in one of the countries then, either Eswatini or Rwanda, who've agreed to take in these hardened criminals. Hendrik Bard says, can we send them some of our members of parliament in exchange for their criminals? Oh, well. And Pila Soma says, it's truly madness that's happening. So as a reminder that the views expressed are not those of SABC News, but do keep your comments coming to as far as that question is concerned. What do you make of the United States signing agreements with Eswatini and Rwanda and possibly other African countries to take in hardened criminals that it no longer wants within its territory, and their home nations certainly don't want to welcome them back? When we come back, though, on a more lighter note, we'll talk artificial intelligence in Kenya. Don't go away. Welcome back. From Nairobi to New York, Kenya is emerging as a digital trailblazer, powering progress with AI, data and innovation, all while anchoring technology in trust and inclusion, according to local authorities. Well, today on Unwrap Africa, we're fortunate enough to explore how Kenya is reimagining technology's role in shaping Africa's future. To help us talk about this, we're joined by Philip Thigo, Special Envoy on Technology in the Executive Office of the President of Kenya. He also leads, or is a leading voice, in fact, in digital policy as well as innovation, and represents Kenya in global tech forums, co-chairing or co-leading negotiations on AI at the United Nations even. Good to have your time, sir. Welcome to Unwrap Africa. As I was saying, Kenya's newly launched artificial intelligence strategy, that's 2025 to 2030, has been developed through extensive consultation with the government's agencies, but also the private sector, academia, civil society, even international partners. What has been the driving force behind this leadership push, and how do you see it, Philip, positioning Kenya globally?
And thank you so much, SABC, for having me for this conversation. I think for Kenya, it's really about leadership, and I love the interview you had with your ambassador in New York, because part of what we're seeing is that a lot of African countries have always been seen as the users of this technology. And I think the Kenya's drive is that for the first time, the same way the UN has never had a woman Secretary General, we're also saying that for the first time, because technology, whether it's the first, second, and third industrial revolution, has always been built on the back of Africans. And so for this time, Kenya is deciding, listen, if we've been building this anyway and not getting the shared value out of it, then it's a high time we lead. And so that's actually been Kenya's posture, but very much around getting also Africa.
And the vision, pardon me, Philip, the vision we're seeing, at least at this stage, already starting to translate into tangible impact, if I can phrase it in that way, when you look at agriculture, education, banking, and even sustainability, right, to name a few. When you then take a bird's eye view of the ways in which these changes have been implemented, which of the projects would you say best showcase Kenya's ability to merge innovation with real-world benefits for the people, ultimately?
I think if you think about our biggest challenge in the continent are twofold, right? So there's the issue of food systems and our ability to feed ourselves, and there's the issue around healthcare and healthcare innovation. So if you look at those two interventions, for me, they're the greatest example of what we've been able to do. One, for example, is how AI has been able to improve value chains like dairy. I mean, things that people don't think about, but matters closely to people on the ground. Value chains like potato, cassava, improving crops and crop outcomes, but also remember improving farmer incomes and reducing the cost of the plate, especially where we are now in the current, economic challenge. And that part, of course, is healthcare and health outcomes, where Africans for the longest time have been struggling with health. And now with AI, especially women, and increasingly now this being Women's Month in South Africa, I think it's important to see how AI has been able to improve maternal health, but also pregnancy outcomes. I mean, challenges that other countries or continents have been able to overcome over the longest period of time.
And how well, Philip, just on that point, do you think the rest of the continent is doing, or the continent as a whole, in focusing the introduction of AI on solving the day-to-day problems, right? Because when people think of the AI conversation, at least at a very layman's level, it seems quite highbrow and as though it's almost geared to the developing world, or developed world, pardon me.
And I get it. And this is the challenge, right? So because AI, in terms of how it's a general purpose technology, people don't see it, right? So we've all been using AI from the 1950s. I think it's just now in the 2022-23 with generative AI is when everybody's all of a sudden thinks AI is new. I don't think it's new. So I think a lot of African countries have been using it but not knowing it. For example, if you look at the fintech space or the financial space, where the African financial ecosystem is a little bit different, right? So that banks have been using AI, or mobile money has been using AI to understand people's spend, and therefore offering these interesting customized loans for across the entire ecosystem. If you ask me how are we doing broadly, I think we're in the right place. One, in sort of the infrastructure piece, so connectivity. It's been a challenge, but I think we are getting there. South Africa, of course, is leading in terms of the data centers. So, I mean, you have 50% of all data centers in Africa. The second part, of course, is the data part. I think you've seen many countries enacting data legislations that kind of create sort of the space where you can use data safely and within secure. The other part, of course, is the energy piece. We've been struggling with it, but you've seen now us investing in green, clean energy. And I think in that one we are leading. Of all continents, Africa is really keen on ensuring that AI is powered by green and clean energy.
And one of the other issues that always come up when you talk about artificial intelligence is trust, right? Kenya now working on putting together a 2025 Global Trust Summit and setting the international standard around ethics as well as digital inclusion then becomes paramount. How should Africa be approaching the conversation around trust and ethics and inclusivity?
So if you think about trust, it comes from the fundamental understanding that the current age is not or cannot be led by one actor. It's not for government alone, it's not for private sector alone, it's not for civil society, and neither should we leave citizens aside. The whole issue then we need to think about is in this era, especially of misinformation, disinformation, and deepfakes, and also bias, is how do we ensure that everybody is part of this collaborative that builds this imagined digital future that then delivers for everybody. And that fundamentally, as you know, is the basis of trust. And so how do we ensure that built on our own Africa's notions of Ubuntu, and we know this, right? So we have been the custodians of trust, whether from barter trade, from our culture, from how we engage. And this is something I believe Africa can teach the rest of the world. That technology has always been there. This is just a different iteration, but technology must be built on human values, which includes ethics, accountability, responsibility, and transparency.
Philip Thigo, it's been such a pleasure to talk to you. We'll hopefully have you back for a much longer discussion. Philip is the Special Envoy on Technology in the Executive Office of the President of Kenya. Thank you so much for being on Unwrap Africa today.
Thanks so much for having me.
Well, when we come back, we'll continue to get responses to the question of the day. We'll also take you through some of the other items we've prepared for you tonight. promised before we went on that quick break, we did say we were going to take a look at more of your thoughts or responses to our questions tonight about views on the United States sending hardened criminals to African countries like Rwanda and Eswatini. More of your comments coming in from X, I believe. Let's see here. We looked at Daz, who said he thinks it's good for our country as well as the economy. Victor Moyo says, why do Rwanda and Eswatini want hardened criminals in the first place? What do they benefit from that? What kind of deal is that? It confirms the inferiority status of Africans according to the West and ourselves. Jimmy says, America is not wrong. African leaders are just for a few dollars. You fill in the blanks, I guess. Leja Lito says that while the DRC is signing mineral deals with the US companies, Rwanda's government has found a new business model, importing criminals from the US in a $5 million deal to take in 250 inmates. As the Rwandan economy teeters, President Kagame is now focused on profiting from human exports. That's according to Leja Lito. And that's just some of the commentary that has come out of the question this evening. Before we go, though, we want to end on a happier note. Africa, home to more than 2,000 languages, each with their own unique characteristics. Pan-African Cultural Experience founder Shao has given us a glimpse at Kiswahili.
Faye is passionate about African languages. She was more than excited to give us a crash course on Kiswahili.
As I said, Kiswahili is a Bantu language. So there are a lot of words that are in the Kiswahili language. It's a collection of different languages from Bantu languages like Shona, Zulu, and all other Niger, Congo languages. Okay. I'll teach you to greet. Ntlanta, habari ya asubuhi.
Nzuri.
Habari ya mchana.
Nzuri.
You got it right. The Swahili experience is mostly focusing on the main mandate of the organization, but also bringing in the language part. The common language is one of the major tools that we can use to implement the Africa Continental Free Trade. Because as we remove the barriers, the tariff barriers, we also need to remove the language barriers. So what you're saying that, as we say, we want common market, we want free movement of people, we believe people need to also communicate.
This organization believes that language plays a very important role in the development of Africa as a whole.
I believe now when we're talking about economic transformation in Africa Continental Free Trade, this language is going to help us. And if you look at the G20, we know G20 is happening now in South Africa. Most of the G20 countries, they've invested in Kiswahili and they have Kiswahili in their broadcasting or in their education system.
Faye shared with us that women are at the heart of this organization's mandate.
Our main objective is to stimulate entrepreneurship, manufacturing and cross-border trading, as well as tourism. So we advocate and support women-owned projects. To Unwrap Africa viewers from Cape Town to Cairo, Zanzibar to Casablanca, Lamu to Lagos, I say Asante Sana. In South Africa, it is a Women Month, and to wish you a happy Women Month or Happy Women's Day in Kiswahili, I'll say heri ya siku ya wanawake Afrika ya Kusini.
And what better way to say goodbye at the end of this edition of Unwrap Africa. Back with you at 8 p.m. next Sunday right here on SABC News. Bye-bye.